Hey, everybody. It is Monday, June 17th. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm mo.news.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to.
Moshe, how was your very first Father's Day?
Jill, it was amazing. So grateful. My wife, Alex, planned an incredible day. Well, I told her the beginning of the day. I think this is my favorite day of the year. It was my first Father's Day. And timing wise, it comes like 3 weeks after my birthday. And this morning first they let me sleep in, and then she came in with Olivia with Olivia's gift for me. She made a board book of a baby book of photos of highlights from our first 9 months. Adorable book. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much better than my birthday. Who needs a birthday? Father's Day is the best. And so by the end of the day, I told her she filled my cup. I'm just so grateful. We went out to Governor's Island, which, if you haven't been in New York, is sort of a getaway these days. It's a former military base. They turned it into a park and has restaurants. And so we spent the day out there, and it was a beautiful day. And I'm just I'm on a high right now as we record this podcast.
I could tell because I was running a little bit late from my in-laws, and I was just like, I'm sorry, I need 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes. And you're like, no worries, all good. Alex is cooking dinner. And I could tell even through text message, your vibe, you were in a great place. So
I'm just, I'm at a Zen level. I'm at a very happy Zen level.
Well, that is awesome because fatherhood and parenthood is really difficult, but also the best thing ever.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're able to really enjoy it and take it in is really special. So I'm happy that you had such an incredible day. And I am not surprised at all, knowing your wife, that she had some awesome surprises for you.
And Jill, I should ask, how was your birthday weekend? It wasn't just Father's Day weekend. It was your birthday weekend.
My birthday weekend was awesome. I had very few things planned. And then last minute, just things started to happen with some friends. It was great. The birthday weekend was awesome. And I hope that I gave my husband a wonderful Father's Day. And I think I gave my dad a great Father's Day present because I wrote about him in the sports section of Enclave in my newsletter this week. And I think that was really meaningful and special for him. So I think I did as well as I could.
Jill, dads don't require much. We don't demand that much. I think as you told me about Michael's Day, I was like, oh yeah, the one thing I think many of us just want is especially with young kids, is to sleep in the morning. And that certainly goes a long way.
Yeah, that was my gift to him, keeping the kids as quiet as humanly possible until he got up, and then we had breakfast ready for him. So, and with that begins another week. I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend and a happy Father's Day to everyone as well. Plenty of news to get to, despite the fact that we're cruising into summer in a week. So here are the headlines. The Supreme Court starts to release its biggest decisions of the year. We'll preview the huge rulings regarding abortion, guns, drugs, January 6th, and one of the criminal cases against Donald Trump. Speaking of which, Trump and Joe Biden both out on the campaign trail this weekend. Trump was in Michigan, Biden in Hollywood, and we begin the 10-day countdown to the first presidential debate. Going abroad, we take a look at the Ukraine peace conference over the weekend and Vladimir Putin's ceasefire offer. How far apart are the two sides? New York considers banning masks on the subway after a rise in anti-Semitic incidents by mask-wearing demonstrators. 100 comedians walk into the Vatican to meet the Pope. And no, Moshe, that is not the beginning of a joke. That's a real news story.
Yes, we will tell you about why the Pope was meeting with some of the most famous comedians in the world.
A major sports broadcaster says he's ready to retire. And a huge movie opening this weekend, plus Moshe is on this day in history.
Your clue, you're in and then you're out, you're up and then you're down, you're wrong and then you're right, it's black and it's white. Jill?
It's a Katy Perry song. The title is escaping me.
Jill, literally the name of the song is Hot and Then Cold. You're pretty hot right there.
Oh, God. I lose credibility every day on this podcast. It's just, it's unbelievable. Okay. All right. Let's start with the Supreme Court and what will be a very busy final few weeks for this term. Many of you have been asking about what you should be looking out for. So here is the state of play. Justices still have 20 cases to issue rulings on before they break for summer. And the number of blockbuster cases in that list is pretty high. They usually wrap things up the last week of June. So last week, we told you about their ruling on the abortion pill, mifepristone, rejecting a bid to overturn FDA approval for the pill and keeping it legal, at least for now. On Friday, the court ruled 6-3 against a federal ban on bump stock devices. Those are devices that enable semi-automatic weapons to fire rapidly, more like machine guns. A Texas gun shop owner challenged the ban. It actually dates back to the Trump presidency. That gun shop owner claiming that the ATF improperly interpreted a federal law banning machine guns as extending to bump stocks. The conservative justices ruling, like they have a number of times recently, that it is up to Congress to pass new laws, and federal agencies have more limited powers to interpret existing laws to get around Congress.
Yes, remember, this stemmed from that Vegas mass shooting, the worst in American history. The shooter in that case used a bump stock. It's essentially a device that lets you fire even more quickly using the energy of the gun to allow your finger to pull the trigger quicker. 60 people were killed from that shooting, hundreds injured. As to not force congressional Republicans to take a challenging gun rights vote, Trump just had the ATF ban bump stocks at the agency level. And so now you have the court ruling saying, actually, they couldn't interpret the anti-machine gun law from the 1930s that way. Congress has to do it. Notably, in an opinion written by Justice Kavanaugh, a conservative, he said that given what he saw from the case, that, yeah, the bump stock should probably be banned. But again, it's on Congress to do so. And we're seeing a lot of that lately, and you might see it in the next couple of weeks. You know, essentially the Supreme Court saying Congress needs to do its job the way we interpret the Constitution. The FDA, the Energy Department, the EPA, et cetera, are over-interpreting existing law to push forth their agenda because Congress isn't doing anything.
All right, even with those cases out of the way, there's still a lot on the docket that we are waiting for rulings on, so we wanted to go through a few of them here. First, we are looking for a make or break decision for Donald Trump. It's United States versus Trump. The question, Trump's claim that presidents are immune from prosecution for official acts that they took during their time in office. Special counsel Jack Smith, who is prosecuting Trump, argues that he should face criminal charges for conspiring to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Smith's team says that the acts Trump is charged with, like pushing Pence to reject election results on January 6th, are not part of a president's official duties. Trump, though, says his conduct after the 2020 election constitutes official presidential acts for which he is immune from prosecution. The timing of this decision may be as important as the outcome. If the court rules against Trump, it's possible that his trial could take place before November's election. If the court rules for him, that could delay things until after the November election. And if he wins the election, he could order the Justice Department to dismiss the case or even pardon himself if he is convicted. Also, another key political case, the January 6th Capitol riot case, Fisher versus the United States. The question, whether rioters that attacked the Capitol on January 6th, 2021, may be prosecuted under a federal obstruction law. The law at issue criminalizes any effort to obstruct, influence, or impede any official proceeding. Conviction can result in a prison sentence up to 20 years. The government says about 330 January 6th defendants have been charged with violating that law. One of the January 6th defendants has argued that the obstruction charge should be waived on the grounds that the law in question has been improperly applied in this case. It could potentially impact hundreds of similar J6 cases, including Trump's. They argue that the law is limited to evidence tampering and therefore should not apply to their actions, such as the alleged assault of a police officer.
So the interesting thing here, depending on how the court rules on the January 6th case, is that it could impact these hundreds of January 6th cases, because that's one of the major criminal offenses they've been going after them on, and could impact Trump's immunity case. So they have to be considering this in tandem, potentially. Jill, a few other cases that we'll be watching for decisions on in the next 2 weeks here. There was one on there's a key case on abortion emergencies. It's called Moyle versus the United States. The question in this case, whether emergency rooms in states with strict abortion bans must still perform the procedure. So effectively, it's a case here between federal law and state law. There's a federal law called EMTALA, Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. It was enacted back in the 80s and requires hospitals receiving federal funds to provide patients with stabilizing care. The court has to decide whether federal law, in this case, overrides Idaho's near total abortion ban. Essentially, should federal law require doctors to perform emergency abortions in states with near total bans? So as we've been talking about all these abortion cases coming out of the Roe v. Wade overturning 2 years ago, yet another case to rule on here. There's another gun case that we'll be watching that could have some major ramifications. The case is called U.S. versus Rahimi. This is a case as to whether the government can strip gun rights from people who are under domestic violence restraining orders. At issue here in the court is a guy named Zaki Rahimi. He was convicted federally for possessing firearms despite his domestic violence restraining order. So Rahimi argues that federal law, the automatic ban on gun possession for domestic violence protection orders, violates his Second Amendment rights. So even though he's committed domestic violence, he argues that the Second Amendment should override that. So that'll be a key case here, especially with the amount of gun violence, Jill, that we see related to those who begin by committing domestic violence. So a lot of people are watching what the court rules on that case. We'll also be watching not one, not two, but three major social media cases on the power a state has to control content versus the social media companies, free speech versus hate speech, disinformation. There were a couple laws we've told you about that were enacted in Florida and Texas that say social media companies cannot make editorial judgments about which posts to allow, which to censor. So a lot of questions there when it comes to internet law, social media law. There's also another case called Murphy versus Missouri. That's how much power does the federal government have to work with social media companies to decide what content is and isn't allowed. There's also a couple more cases we're watching, Jill. It's really an incredible docket this year. There's a Purdue Pharma case as to whether their settlement to pay billions for the opioid pandemic that shielded members of the Sackler family that owns Purdue, whether that's legit here. And so that decision could have a major impact.
Finally, there is a homelessness case that we are watching. The Supreme Court's going to be ruling on out of Oregon. The question is whether or not cities should be allowed to outlaw sleeping on the streets, even when no beds are available in local shelters. Grants Pass is a small city in Oregon. They tried to ban homeless people from sleeping on the street, even without sufficient shelters. Lower courts have ruled that arresting someone for sleeping outside when there are no free shelter beds available violates the Eighth Amendment, which protects against cruel and unusual punishment. Justices must decide what boundaries can be drawn to regulate homelessness and who should be able to set those boundaries.
And so that case could have a major impact in some cities where we see huge homeless populations, LA, the Bay Area, et cetera.
All right, now to presidential politics. President Biden and former President Trump were both out campaigning and fundraising this weekend and are now 10 days away from their first debate. The Biden campaign and its allies raked in more than $30 million as part of a star-studded Hollywood fundraiser, breaking the record for the Democratic Party's largest fundraising event. Biden appeared at the fundraiser alongside former President Obama, actors George Clooney and Julia Roberts, and comedian Jimmy Kimmel. Saturday's fundraiser also featured performances in a string of celebrities, including Barbra Streisand, Jack Black, Cheryl Lee Ralph, and Jason Bateman. While Biden, like most Democrats historically, has support from a number of Hollywood veterans, though it is not clear that they have gotten him much traction so far with voters. Remember, we told you about that press conference that Robert De Niro had recently.
Yeah, which was sort of a dud and didn't go so well. The one that he had outside the Trump trial where they were yelling at him, etc. The thing about Hollywood, Jill, and I asked this question to the premium Instagram account over the weekend, is how much traction does it still get you? There are two goals Democrats have traditionally had with Hollywood, because they've traditionally, going back to like JFK. Hollywood has been enamored mainly with Democratic candidates, given their more liberal sensibilities and given the relationship there. And you've had some who've done an incredible job there. Clinton, Obama, Biden, a bit less so. He continues to get money from them, but ultimately, they aren't feeling him as much this year as in previous years. And the larger question, celebrities, how much influence do they still have over fans? What do their endorsements even mean these days? And especially the veterans versus the younger ones. You see, Taylor Swift and Beyonce were not there, and they haven't endorsed yet. And the question is, will they endorse Biden? Will they get involved in this cycle? Then you have people like The Rock and Cardi B, who helped Biden back in 2020, indicated this time around that they do not plan to get involved in this election. Not necessarily that they're going for Trump, but they're just not going to engage their fan bases in all of that. And so that's the Hollywood situation. He continues to fundraise. Biden has had a huge advantage in fundraising, but Trump is caught up here. And then one of the questions we're asking this cycle too is, how much does money make a difference this time around, given how well known the candidates are? And how much influence social media has versus traditional 30-second ads on TV.
Moshe, I weighed in on the mo.news premium account when you asked the question. I'm curious what the majority of people said. Do they care about celebrity endorsements?
Well, the mo.news community says they do not care about celebrity endorsements, but the mo.news community is a well-informed group that is highly politically engaged and uses actual policies, information, and experiences to make up their decisions. I think when you look at celeb endorsements, they're looking to get at what they call, in political terms, politicians call these people low information voters, as in they're making a gut decision and they heard that somebody either hates somebody or likes somebody.
To me, the list of celebrities, and obviously I have nothing against Julia Roberts and some of these names, but they're older celebrities at this point.
Right. Right. Like ultimately, like imagine the conversation like, oh, George Clooney's supporting him this year. Oh, I wasn't thinking about voting for him, but like now I'm going to vote for him. No insult to George Clooney. We'd love to have you on the podcast, but I'm just saying.
Which my response to you, I don't know if you read it, was like, I definitely don't care. And then as a joke, I wrote, unless it's Taylor Swift, and then I'll do whatever she says.
Well, that's the big one. That's the big one. Like, what will Taylor Swift do this time around? Incidentally, Trump chimed in on that last week in an interview saying that he's worried. He's like, why would she go for him? Like, how could she go for Joe Biden? She's beautiful, but like, I can't believe she would go for Joe Biden. So clearly something that's on Trump's mind. Speaking of Trump, by the way, he was in Michigan over the weekend. He had two major events in Michigan. There was a major conference, the Turning Point Action Conference. That's a group of MAGA loyalists, hardcore conservatives. He spoke to them. He did an hour and 20-minute speech, Jill. I cannot do it justice in this podcast. He addressed, 50 different subjects. But he tried to summarize his pitch to his base as this was Trump. Under Biden, illegal aliens are better off. Terrorists are better off. China is better off. Russia is better off. The drug cartels are better off. But the American people were far better off under a gentleman named Donald J. Trump. Have you heard of him? So that's a bit of his pitch. Expect to hear that in the debate next week. Trump also, incidentally, was jumping around on a lot of issues. He also railed against water pressure issues. This has been a thing that he's brought up a lot, that environmental regulations recently, trying to cut down on water waste, have led to low pressure showers. So he did like all these anecdotes about how he showers with his shampoo and likes water pressure, etc. Anyway, so that was him at that event. He then also spoke at a Black church in Michigan. We've talked about this before on the podcast and the newsletter. He's making a big push in the Black community, trying to just nip at the edges here, getting especially working class African-American voters to consider him after years of loyalty to the Democratic Party. He argued, incidentally, connecting the immigration issue to the Black community, that the Black community, he says, are being hurt by immigrants coming into the country illegally. They're invading and taking your jobs, is a bit of what his pitch was to the Black community in Michigan.
Meanwhile, on to the debates. CNN released additional details over the weekend on the parameters agreed upon by the Trump and Biden campaigns. The 90-minute debate on June 27th, next Thursday, will include 2 commercial breaks. Both candidates agreed to appear at podiums, and their podium positions will be determined by a coin flip. While no props or pre-written notes will be allowed on the stage, candidates will be given a pen, a pad of paper, and a bottle of water. And microphones will be muted throughout the debate, except for the candidate whose turn it is to speak. That is a major change from previous debates in previous cycles when the mics were left on all the time.
Yeah, and this change comes as a result of that first 2020 debate where Trump interrupted Biden dozens of times. Biden also interrupted Trump a few times. But infamously, we've played this exchange a few times on the podcast before. Trump was interrupting Biden at one point so many times where Biden just said, "Come on, man, like enough of this, man." And so it appears they've agreed to the muting feature this time. Remember, this debate will take place also in a CNN studio this go around. So no studio audience, which is something Trump was hoping for. And this will be the earliest debate in modern history, Jill. June. They typically take place in the fall, a few weeks before the election. But this time around, the candidates wanted to debate early. And one more thing I should add on this debate. Many of you have been asking about RFK Jr., why he isn't on stage. CNN released, again, their requirements to be part of the debate. 2 key requirements. 1, you have to get at least 15% in a number of national polls. 2, you have to be on enough ballots to reach 270 electoral votes to become president. So RFK actually has hit that number in polling, but the electoral vote issue is his key issue right now. He's currently only on the ballot as an independent candidate in 6 states, making him currently eligible for only 89 electoral votes. You need 270 to be president. So without him being on enough ballots, it does not appear he will make this debate. Now, the second debate is September 10th. By then, he could be on enough ballots, but he's starting from scratch here as an independent, and it takes a while to get on each state's ballot. So likely just seeing Trump and Biden on June 27th.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't wait.
We will have, it's going to be interesting, Jill. Even some people commented on the Instagram, on the Instagram over the weekend, they're going to be standing for 90 minutes, both of them, especially Biden. It was interesting because some people were thinking that they would go to the seated format, which has been one of the formats you've seen in previous debates, but they've both decided to stand at a podium the entire time. I think, everyone will be scrutinizing every single detail. Trump's been making the case that Biden's, losing his mind and incompetent and not all there. So that's the threshold that Biden will have to. And Democrats have been trying to say the same thing, that, Trump is starting to lose it. He'll go on rants, he's out of touch, etc. So, people will be watching the body language, the exchanges, I think the muting feature, and the fact that it'll be in a studio audience, and the fact that it'll be in an empty studio will be an interesting dynamic. And obviously the moderators, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash from CNN, will play a major role here.
I don't want to go on about this too much longer, but there is somebody in my life who is absolutely convinced that President Biden will have the questions beforehand. And I said, look, I don't have all of the rules of the debate, but having worked in network news for as long as I have, I promise you that he will not have the questions beforehand. It'd
be the scandal of the century, and there's no way Donald Trump would agree to a debate, and Donald Trump's people would agree to a debate on CNN, even if that was a remote chance. By the way, it's not that hard to figure out what the questions are going to be. Immigration, Israel, Ukraine, guns, climate, these are issues they talk about every day. So it's they're going to have the questions beforehand. I could, by the way, having prepped presidential debates during my time at Fox and CBS, I bet without fail, we could predict, Jill, 85 to 90% of the questions that they'll get.
And Moshe, the only reason that I am mentioning it is because I do think that there are some conspiracy theories out there that people think that, networks are giving the president the questions. People think that they give him the questions before press conferences and things like that as well. And it's just not how it works.
It's not how it works. It's a different format altogether. I think some people link it to the 2016 scandal where Donna Brazile, the former head of the DNC, for a Hillary Clinton town hall meeting, did tell the Clinton campaign, give them a heads up on some topics that would come up. By the way, CNN fired her and condemned that and changed their rules after that. And again, that was a town hall meeting with one candidate. So I think there is certainly history that people will link to there. But again, at this level, you don't mess around, because otherwise, if you're CNN, you will permanently never get a debate ever again for the rest of time if you somehow let that happen.
Time for the speed read from Reuters. More than 80 countries attending a conference dedicated to the future of Ukraine declared that the country's territorial integrity should be respected and urged dialogue between all parties to find a lasting settlement with Russia. The vast majority of countries attending also backed a call for the full exchange of captured soldiers and the return of deported Ukrainian children. However, a number of key countries avoided joining in on that statement. India, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and the United Emirates, among those who have important trade and political relationships with Russia, attended the summit but didn't sign on to the agreement. Ukraine is demanding an end to Russia's invasion after 2.5 years of war, the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian soil, and the restoration of Ukraine's pre-war borders with Russia.
So those are Ukraine's terms. Putin put out his own terms on Friday, Jill, and the two sides are very far apart. Putin promised an end to the war, a ceasefire immediately, if Ukraine agrees to the following Russian conditions. Putin wants Ukrainian troops to withdraw from 4 key regions of Ukraine that Russia claims it owns. That includes Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. Notably, Putin right now occupies part of each of those regions, but doesn't even control the entire province. But he actually wants Ukraine to get out completely, so withdraw even beyond where the battle lines currently are. That would entail about a quarter of Ukraine going to Russia, on top of Crimea, which Russia took in 2014 in an invasion and still occupies. Of course, Ukraine, even if they took those terms, is worried that Putin would then use those 4 provinces of Ukraine to effectively rearm, recoup militarily, and then invade Ukraine further in future years. So Zelensky called the demands Hitler-like, comparing it to Hitler back in the late 30s, taking portions of countries, promising an end to war, and then, of course, subsequently invading them. So those are Putin's terms. By the way, he's not done. He also wants Ukraine to abandon all efforts to join NATO. So those were among his ceasefire demands late on Friday. You laid out Ukraine's demands, two sides very far apart here. Ukraine wants to give up nothing. Russia wants a lot beyond what it currently has. And so that's where we stand right now.
All right, from the New York Times, the governor of New York exploring a ban on the wearing of face masks in New York City's subway amid concerns that such coverings could shield the identities of those committing hate crimes. Governor Kathy Hochul said that she would consider reinstituting a pre-COVID pandemic ban on wearing masks on the subway. She says state officials would not tolerate individuals using masks to evade being responsible for criminal or threatening behavior. We're going to play a clip now. This was the scene on the New York City subway last week when a group of anti-Israel protesters targeted quote-unquote Zionists. A Zionist, as we've talked about, is pretty much just someone who believes that Israel has a right to exist, which the majority of Jewish people do, as do many Americans. So just take a listen.
Repeat after me. Repeat after me. Raise your hands if you're a Zionist. 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 This is your chance to get out. This is your chance to get out.
Moshe, I have to say, of all of the protests and riots and anti-Semitism that we have seen over the past few years, and in particular since October 7th, this had me a little shook, for lack of a better word. This is New York City. This is a subway. And I couldn't help thinking, what would I do if I was on that subway? And I posted something about that on my Instagram account, and I was flooded with messages from other people who said the same thing, that they have not been able to stop thinking about it, and also wondering what they would have done if they were on that train.
Yeah, crazy. I hear from so many Jews who are scared to be openly Jewish, who are hiding their Jewish stars, who are hiding any religious connection, or are hiding any public religious connection. If they wear a yarmulke, a head covering as part of the religion, they're wearing a baseball cap now because of the fear of this. So that video is certainly very concerning. It led to the president of the United States, Biden, on Friday, condemning some of the acts, putting out a statement openly, which he has done a couple times throughout this war, but significant that it happened last week. And you have the governor here and the mayor here saying that something has to be done, in particular with protesters who are using masks to intimidate, to threaten, to discriminate. We should note that before the COVID pandemic, New York had a law for about 150 years about mask wearing, banning mask wearing due to criminals being able to use masks to hide their identity. Of course, that changes in 2020 with mask wearing being recommended by the federal government, allowing mask wearing because of COVID. So now there's a push with some of these recent incidents for the government here to bring back the mask ban. They're trying to figure out a way to do it that takes into account medical conditions, takes into account Halloween or being a performer, but also doesn't allow protesters to use masks to threaten and intimidate people. So the question is when New York will take it up, because the state legislature is actually done for the year. in June. A lot of state legislatures meet every other year. Some meet just for a few months every year. It's a part-time job in nearly every state. So it's unclear when New York would come around to potentially enacting such a prohibition.
From the Associated Press, 100 comedians walk into the Vatican and meet the Pope. No, that is not the beginning of a joke. It is actually what happened, as Pope Francis hosted a very different audience at the Vatican on Friday. The pontiff welcomed dozens of comedians from 15 nations, including U.S. celebrities Whoopi Goldberg, Jimmy Fallon, Chris Rock, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Stephen Colbert, and Conan O'Brien. Francis telling the comedians, quote, "In the midst of so much gloomy news, immersed as we are in many social and even personal emergencies, you have the power to spread peace and smiles. You unite people because laughter is contagious." And then he asked them jokingly, "Please pray for me for, not against."
Yeah, the Pope has a sense of humor. Apparently, when people tell the Pope that they're praying for him, the Pope will respond, "For or against?" He pointed out, the Pope did, for all the comedians in attendance late last week, that, quote, "divine wisdom practiced your art for the benefit of none other than God himself, the first spectator in history, with God delighting in the works that he made. Remember this, when you manage to bring intelligent smiles to the lips of even one single spectator, you also make God smile." Though Francis also added that it was okay to laugh at God in the same way we play and joke with the people that we love, effectively giving permission to these comedians, not that they need it, to, mock God or tell jokes whenever they feel it's appropriate. Jill, there were a few interviews with some of the comedians and their experience afterwards. Here's a bit of Conan O'Brien.
It's one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, and I did get a rosary bead from the Pope, and so that's a nice thing to have. I can bring that to my mom, and that's going to mean the world to her. So, and then I can take it away from my mom and sell it on eBay. So, and then keep the cash for myself. So, yeah, I've got this whole thing worked out.
So you can hear there from Conan. That was an honor for these comedians, and they loved meeting the Pope. They're still spitting their one-liners after the meeting.
From ESPN, NBA legend and broadcaster Charles Barkley announced Friday that next year will be his last on TV. Barkley telling NBA TV, quote, I ain't going nowhere other than TNT, but I've made the decision that no matter what happens, next year is going to be my last year on television. And I just want to say thank you to my NBA family. You guys have been great to me. My heart is full with joy and gratitude.
When he's talking about TNT there, he's talking about the cable network owned by Warner Brothers. Right now, the NBA rights deal is set to expire. It appears that NBC and Amazon have outbid Warner Brothers for NBA rights. Barkley's been reluctant to move to a new network. Even if TNT picks up the rights, he says he's gone after next year. Jill, he's still pretty young, so I think that he ends up sticking around, but he put out the statement nonetheless that he's retiring. Speaking of the NBA, the finals are still going on. Game 5 is tonight. The Boston Celtics had hoped to sweep over the weekend. They were leading 3-0, but the Mavericks blew them out in a huge blowout over the weekend. So the series is now at 3-1. So the Celtics are still just one game away from winning the championship. The Mavericks need to win out here, 3 more games if they hope to win as underdogs here. Anyhow, the game tonight, Game 5, is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
And from Variety, Disney and Pixar's animated sequel Inside Out 2 scored a huge $155 million in its first weekend of release, doubling up on Dune Part 2 and the Godzilla Kong sequel as the biggest opening of the year. Inside Out 2 is also the first movie since last July's Barbie to debut above 100 million. The second Inside Out 2 also connected at the international box office with $140 million, enough to surpass Frozen 2 as the biggest overseas animated opening of all time. Turnout was especially strong across Latin America, where it landed the second biggest opening ever behind Disney's Marvel epic Avengers Endgame.
Jill, I just want to note all the movies you listed there, all sequels. Inside Out 2, Dune Part 2, Godzilla Kong sequel, Frozen 2, Avengers Endgame. It speaks to the conversation we've been having about how there's no real original ideas in Hollywood, it feels these days.
Correct. And that's why I have not seen any of these.
Well, Inside Out 2 Pixar and Disney are hoping will start to bring people back to the theaters. The Pixar head who directed Inside Out said that COVID-era releases trained audiences to watch the releases at home, and they're trying to get people to come back to the theater. And so they're hoping this is the beginning of a turning the trend here, because Pixar has been struggling in recent years with Soul, Luca, Turning Red. While they might have gotten some critical acclaim, people haven't been seeing them in the theater. So a big weekend for them. It remains to be seen how well the rest of the films this summer set to come out will do. Reminder, you got Quiet Place Day 1 coming out next weekend, Despicable Me 4 coming out July 4th weekend, Deadpool and Wolverine in late July, all hoping to capitalize on the momentum coming out of Inside Out 2. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1885 in the waters of New York. On this day, a dismantled Statue of Liberty, a gift of friendship from the people of France to the people of America, arrives in New York Harbor after being shipped across the Atlantic. The Statue of Liberty arrived in 350 different pieces in 200 different cases. The copper and iron statue then had to be reassembled and then was eventually put up and inaugurated with a ceremony attended by then President Grover Cleveland. It was intended to commemorate the American Revolution, the abolition of slavery following the U.S. Civil War, and a century of friendship between the U.S. and France. Jill, fun fact, the statue was originally copper-colored. It was brown. And if you look at early photos and sketches and artist renderings of the Statue of Liberty during its first 20 to 30 years or so, it's a brown statue. But it would then the copper undergoes a color change process due to the weather, leading to the green-blue hue. And the Statue of Liberty you have today, they tried to clean it a few times and at some point just gave up, left her green, and there she stands today.
Obviously, we're used to the green, but I like the green. I can't even imagine it being brown.
We've accepted the green, but those who were there back in the day would be shocked, being like, "What happened to the brown Statue of Liberty?
What happened?"
All right, we fast forward to 1972. 52 years ago today, the Watergate, an office apartment complex in D.C. that most of the world never knew about, was broken into by 5 men who were later arrested. It was the headquarters of the DNC. It prompted the Watergate scandal that upended Nixon's administration. And also, interesting fact, Jill, Nixon had one of the greatest blowouts in American electoral history in 1972 in his reelection. He didn't need the burglary that would eventually bring him down. One of the ironies and tragedies of the Nixon administration. All right, another infamous incident on this day in history. 30 years ago today, Jill, the O.J. Simpson police chase. An estimated 95 million people watched as Simpson in his Ford Bronco, driven by his friend Al Cowlings, led the LAPD and the California Highway Patrol on a low-speed chase on the 405 in L.A. It came after he was just charged in the murder of his ex-wife and Ron Goldman, the waiter, who was there at her home that night. OJ had a gun allegedly in the car. He had threatened to commit suicide. There was a suicide note he had put together before getting in the Bronco. He was trying to make it to Mexico that day as that chase goes down. All right, and let's end here with a bit of music history. On this day in 1985, Bryan Adams released his song Summer of 69. Jill, just for the record, it was a song that came out in 85 about the summer of 69, talking about a summer 16 years previous. So today, if you were writing a song about 16 years ago, it'd be the summer of 2008.
Thank you, Moshe. Thank you.
In the summer of 2008. Anyway.
As I just entered my 44th year on this planet, thank you for reminding me.
No problem. That's what I'm here for with On This Day in History. Speaking of the summer of 2008, we end with this. Katy Perry, on this day in 2008, June 17th, 2008, released her album, One of the Boys. Among the hits you can be thankful for on that album, I Kissed a Girl and Hot and Cold, as I sang a bit of, or tried to at least recite at the top of the podcast.
I think you said a bit. Like you spoke the words.
It was spoken word, Katy Perry.
Moshe, a solid on this day in history, a little bit of something for everyone. Thank you all for listening to the Mo.news podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. And be sure to join Mo.news Premium, folks. There's a brand new premium pod out today. Our interview with Jonathan Haidt
of the New York Times bestselling Anxious Generation is out today over on the Premium Pod. So make sure to join mo.news/free trial to get access to that, as well as our premium Instagram feed. Jill loved the premium feed over the weekend. A lot of interesting questions coming our way about everything from that New York mask ban that we spoke about to a question we got about how long Biden's and Trump's parents lived respectively. Jill, I didn't realize, for the most part, their parents, Biden and Trump's, lived into their 80s and 90s.
I did think that was an interesting discussion, as was the discussion about just how many people are so upset with both choices for president. That's
something we'll dive into later this week. The double haters. We've told you about this on the podcast before, that ultimately the double haters will determine this election, and we are at a record number. 1 out of 4 Americans hate both candidates. The other 75% like one more than the other. And so the 25% will dictate what happens this November.
All right, everyone, have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.